Hello and welcome everybody. Welcome back to ComedIan MTG. My name is Ian. Today we are breaking down the top 16 from the Cookout, which was Eminence's new in-person event series down in Atlanta, Georgia, which happened this very last weekend. So happy to say the EDH top 16 results are up and ready to go. We're going to break down every deck in the top 16 of this tournament today. Before we do that, remember, while you're here on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button. It helps the channel a ton. And if you're interested in supporting the channel, you can go over to patreon.com/ComedIanMTG. Every little piece of help there helps the channel a ton. And if you would like to receive cEDH coaching from yours truly, you can always hit me up on Gmail. You can always hit me up on Twitter or Discord, any of the following places, which are in the description of this video to find out more about that. Without any further ado, let's break down this top 16 of the Cookout. We have Tiv Is It by Doubt Shadow. This is a pretty classic Tivit list. We've got the regular Tivit stuff. For those who don't know, Tivit is often a one-card win con with the card Time Sieve, which has been a huge format staple. I've done 2 months in a row now with the Mind Sculptors doing a top 10 breakdown. Speaking of which, I am also now the official co-host of the Mind Sculptors, which I don't actually think I've said on this channel, but you should go check out that channel if you're interested in hearing more of my thoughts and musings on this format. But Tivit, as Cal and I have been saying, we have it ranked as our #1 deck in the format at the current moment, which may or may not be arguable and definitely is within the top 3 by sure. And it's continually putting up results in this format. We have the addition of the One Ring, making this deck just even better, even more consistent, making those artifact tutors have additional value in the deck apart from just getting Time Sieve being your one card win con with your commander. This list opting to use Curse Totem. I noticed in the sideboard of this list particularly, there's some staples of the deck that I'm wondering if they were like budget exclusions from the initial list. We have things like Underground Sea, Transmute Artifact, and Grim Monolith specifically that speak to me as if this pilot, despite Eminence having a pro proxy version of this event, I'm wondering if this pilot specifically chose not to proxy. Underground Sea specifically throws the notion to me that maybe this was a choice that was based on budget as opposed to anything else, because I don't really see, playing a card like Underground River over Underground Sea ever being the optimal choice. But apart from that, not many too crazy additions to the standard Tivit archetype. The mana base is the only area where I found some includes that are not traditionally seen, such as using the tapped lands Rafine's Tower or a couple snow-covered basics, which are not usually in the typical list. But, it's classic Tivit list, trying to be the mid-range control deck of the format, using things like Displacer Kitten for a bunch of value, Notion Thief, Urza, all of those things, as well as just winning with classic Thassa's Oracle lines. We have Dargo Thrasios combo mid-range by Freedom Waffle. Freedom, the first in-person tournament I believe I've seen Freedom's name attached with, usually known for doing very well at Mox Masters with this Thrasios Dargo list. The list is pretty strong, classic mid-range list, being explosive, being powerful, able to put up pretty consistent results. You can either neoform your Dargo into a Tidespout Tyrant, you can go with classic Team Sabertooth Docksides lines, and compared to a deck like Dawnwaker, Dargo makes it a little bit more explosive. So if you like the ability to sort of explode out of nowhere, which I think is actually positioned really well in the format right now, then Thrasios Dargo might just be the deck for you. When you lose access to things like Silence and things like that with the Dawnmaker list, you do gain things like Dargo being able to pod into a Tidespout Tyrant, and cards like Greater Good just being insanely powerful, alongside Underworld Breach actually being much more viable in this version of a Thrasios deck than in other versions that exist currently. So congrats to Freedom on another top performance, and great job. We have just another Blue Farm list by Yogg-Sothoth. This is, by definition, just another Blue Farm list. A classic Blue Farm being the, ad nauseum featuring mid-range deck of the format, right? Blue Farm is the more aggressively slanted version of the mid-range decks. We sort of have our creature mid-range, which is things like Thras Dargo and Dawnmaker and stuff like that. And then we have our creature lists, and by creature list, I mean creature light version of these effects, the ones without playing green, and that's our Blue Farm-esque decks, trying to win with things specifically and almost exclusively with Underworld Breach, but I guess sometimes they also can win with classic Thassa's Oracle lines. I know also in this list specifically, they're opting to play Peer into the Abyss, which is not always a popular option, especially since the advent of Orcish Bowmasters being a very scary card to try and peer into. But I am, a little bit surprised to still see this in a lot of Blue Farm lists. I know a lot of them play it as a very, very mid-range deck, so having this giant 7-drop hit in the list is a little bit crazy to me, but obviously list was strong enough to bring this player into the top 16 in this tournament. This is such an interesting list. This is a Jeggy Turbo Stacks Pod by Leonidas 3000. This is a wild Sisay list. It is the a Jugantha Sisay list. So for those who don't know, Jugantha can be your companion if you don't have any of a doubling of any mana value. So for example, if this card was 1 blue instead, it would not be able to be played in this list. But the idea is that you get Jugantha down and you're able to go through a Sisay activation line as soon as you have Jugantha that should be able to win you the game. So you activate, you go grab something like a Saheeli, makes a copy of Jugantha, and you do a bunch of stuff like that. I know specifically that there are cards like Derevi that I believe go into a Najeela, and then with a Samut you basically win the game with combat by just, once again, activating Jugantha only a single time to be able to pull you through this entire line. So yeah, that's kind of the idea behind this list, is that you eventually use Sisay to make a Najeela combo. But I was hearing about this deck a lot during the top 16 of this tournament and throughout the Swiss rounds of this tournament, specifically because it's definitely playing some atypical pieces, things like Static Orb, which I don't traditionally associate with a deck like Sisay, Trinisphere, God Pharaoh Statue, which is one I heard came down turn 3 in one of the games a friend of mine was playing, a Damping Sphere and things like that. So definitely not the classic Tutor Chain Sisay list, much more stacks heavy with cards like Blind Obedience and Deafening Silence, and although I play Deafening Silence in the regular mid-range version, but definitely a wild list. I haven't seen Jugantha Sisay in quite some time, and it's definitely a list that I think a lot of people have overlooked in comparison to more traditional Sisay lists. So congrats on this pilot for taking a rather atypical list up to the top 16. We've got more ninjas. Yeah, Yuriko is back with another top 16. I can't say I haven't seen it in a while anymore, because now this is, I believe, several videos in a row, or if several recently, where we are starting to see Yuriko, a deck that had kind of been out of the top 16 for a long time. I actually lost my win-in for the top 16, or what was equivalent to a win-in for the top 16 to a Yuriko list. I had to survive 2 triggers with 11 life, and they flipped over 18 damage. So that's how I did not make the top 16 in this tournament. But Yuriko seems to be making some kind of comeback. I know I was talking to the pilot who I played against in that game, and they specifically mentioned that Yuriko is really good at like breaking up some of these mid-range pods. We have a lot of classic 1 mana enablers for Yuriko, a lot of cheap stuff and some 0 drops over here, things that'll get your Yuriko game clan online. Obviously, Thassa's Oracle is a main win condition in the deck, but also using cards like Windcaller Aven and Shadow Mortality to just flip over very, very large amounts of damage and bring your opponent's life totals from 40 to 0. It's a deck that can really get out of hand fast and also gets to play so many asymmetrical stacks pieces. Some of the best stacks pieces in the format like Torpor Orb and Null Rod and Curse Totem. It's like really hard for your opponents to be able to play through these cards, and Yuriko is able to swiftly avoid a lot of the things that stop your opponents while also taking advantage of their own list. So congrats to John Kennedy with this list, and nice job. Alright, we have Sans Simic Soliloquy, the Cookout by MTG Hot Dog. This is a Dihada list. Now, MTG Hot Dog, I believe, is their first top 16, which is pretty cool, and with a list that is extremely explosive and can turn the corner real quick. A lot of people have been joking about this Mardu Summer mentality with this new Dihada list, but it's definitely a list that looks like it's here to stay. Disciple of the Vault is definitely one of the most interesting pieces I have seen in these lists. I hadn't seen other folks using this as a win con for this archetype, but it's pretty interesting. Just having redundancy for your Mayhem Devil type effects. I wonder if it's for looping towards the end of the game. But for those who don't know, Dihada is really just like a really aggressive turbo breach deck. So Rog Silas is like the fastest ad nauseum deck in the format, and Dihada to me is the fastest breach deck of the format. What you get is you get the sorcery card Flicker here, and you create a loop where basically you are milling 4, making 4 treasures with Dihada, and you're able to exile 3 of those and only use 2 of that mana to cast the card Flicker targeting Dihada, and that will start to basically mill your entire library with Breach, and you can from there do a number of different things like win with Dualcaster Twin Flame. You can use Mayhem Devil Dockside lines, or apparently Disciple of the Vault Dockside lines, and things like that to be able to kill your opponents after you get that Breach down. But yeah, this is, as I mentioned, I think the fastest Breach deck in the format by a decent amount, and it was initially designed to sort of go underneath the Rhystic studies and the Mystic Remoras of the format because of how quick it can just play Dihada and win, and also you get access to obviously all of White's silence effects to be able to turn the corner. Playing pieces like Bolsa Citadel and the One Ring and Necropotent, really taking advantage of the fact that Dihada has no card advantage in the command zone, but can be so powerful when it gets its engine going. And 24 Lander really, the format is picking up speed, and this is one of those lists that is really really exemplary of that. So congrats to MTG Hot Dog. We have Sphinx, Head, Tomb, Esper Midrange, Big Cats Worldwide by Golden Sabretooth. For those who don't know, Golden Sabretooth is an extremely popular artist in the MTG community and also someone who's been playing cEDH for a decent amount of time. Sabretooth does like a lot of the merch associated with Eminence, so they do like a lot of their playmats, and they have a token booth that they actually set up so they would actually be running between, you know, playing these matches and running between their booth between them. I say between way too many times, but they'd be running back and forth between matches just to be able to run their booth and sell their tokens and things like that. One of the sweetest people I know in this community. I remember seeing them in the top 16 feature pod, and I got so excited because I hadn't known that they qualified. So yeah, we've got pretty classic Tivit stuff here. One of the spiciest options being Gandalf the White. Was talking, I believe actually Sabretooth made a tweet about this today at the time of recording, about how it's really just kind of crazy at being able to tempo in some of your pieces, the ones that are really important. Obviously double ETB trigger with Tivit as it comes into the battlefield. You can also flash in your Lurises, your Oswalds, and then any of your artifacts, including once again time sieve, one of your main win conditions. So it's definitely interesting to be able to play at flash speed, and we've been talking about how flash is a very important thing to be able to give to your permanents as you're playing cEDH, and it sounds like it's and something is being picked up here. I had thought about Gandalf a couple times in this list, and I'm interested to see if it is something that sticks around. But apart from that, pretty standard Tivit list, just playing a lot of strong stuff. This is definitely the least amount of lands I've ever seen in a Tivit. I know when I saw them first talking about how few lands they were playing in the Tivit archetype, I was mind blown because I have been debating between 29 and 30 lands in my Tivit lists. But yeah, congrats to Gold Sabretooth on this deck, and congrats to making this top 16. A really cool person in the community, and someone I'm very glad to see up here in these top ranks. We have Unlimited Power, an overreaction to Bowmaster meta by Nevi. We have a pretty classic Najeela turbo list. We've got the normal Najeela stuff. We got Dorevi as the win condition, Grim Hireling, Samit, all of that normal stuff, and the ad nauseum lines, being able to access all of your free spells, your intuition, Underworld Breach stuff, and also playing the One Ring on top of all of that. I know last week we covered how in Chaos we had Just Ice's #1 ad list not running ad nauseum but playing the One Ring, and this list just saying I'm going to play both. Very, very powerful list. Obviously a deck that we've been talking about a lot over the past few months. A deck that I kind of regret not sleeving up for this tournament, I'm not gonna lie. It's very strong. It does exactly what you expect it to do. It's got a bunch of 1-card win conditions, Flowering in the White Tree being a really cool new addition to the deck, just basically turning your warriors into absolute murder machines. Not that Najeela can't do that already, but this is one of those cards that really makes the clock happen. It also makes Najeela a lot harder to interact with. So congrats to Nevi on this deck. It's a powerful force to be reckoned with, and it's a deck that we're gonna be seeing for a long time. We have the Cookout Blue Farm by Bosch and Roll. This is our first time we have Bosch and Roll just making the top 16 and not winning an entire tournament. Bosch and Roll has been coming to these tournaments and absolutely crushing it, and obviously still very good to be making a top 16 here, but has been absolutely dominating this EDH tournament scene since they started playing, and continuing to once again put up good results. The pretty classic Blue Farm list. A lot of innovations of Blue Farm can be attributed to Bosch and Roll and his work in this deck. A lot of things, basically a lot of the teachings behind it, the idea that you are instead trying to actually create more of a mid-range deck than just a full turbo deck, as a lot of people were playing it, and using Tymna and Crom to the best of their strength, giving you a lot of powerful cards here. Bosch and Roll has even gone on record saying he considers it more of a control deck in some aspects, which is like, you get really into the definitions that define cEDH, because if you don't call a control deck a deck playing this many counter spells, then what do you call a control deck, right? But in general, what traditionally is described as a mid-range cEDH, and a very powerful one at that. A very strong deck, and congrats to Bosch on another top 16. We have Red Lobster by Traffic Cone. Very surprised in a very pleasant way to see a Rog Thras list. This is a list I have a particular fondness for, and I have not picked it up and played it in such a long time. I love this archetype. It is Rograk and Thrasios Turbo Polymorph. The idea is that you turn your Rograk into a Hullbreaker, Horror, Tidespout Tyrant, and use those to combo off, make infinite mana with any number of your very, very, very very, very cheap mana rocks and turn that into an infinite mana that you pump into the other commander, Thrasios. So you use cards like Transmogrify, Reality Scramble, Polymorph, Chaotic Transformation, and I believe there's a new instant one. Oh yeah, there's the instance of Chaos Mutation and Divergent Transformations, and you just basically play your Rogrek. You get to keep all your super cheap free counter spells, all that stuff, and have the Thrasios grind engine, but at the same time you also get to hold up interaction and be able to flip into your win condition at a moment's notice with so much redundancy too. I mean, there's so many different 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different versions of the same effect that kind of make up for the fact that you lack black in this deck. It's a deck that, you know, does have to commit to the board a little bit by playing your commanders, and also gets punished because you don't have many creatures to commit to the board. But super happy to see this archetype seeing play. As I mentioned, I was enjoying it a lot for a few months way back in the day, and it's a deck that I'm really happy to see here making the top result. We have Primal Niv cEDH by Shauna. Shauna coming up here with another top 16. Shauna has done really, really well with this deck. I believe they ended the Swiss like 4-0-3 or something like that. So very, very nice job, and performed quite well with this list. For those who haven't seen it before, this deck is just hard to describe as anything other than a turbo Niv Mizzet deck. The idea is to get Dockside out so that an early Niv Mizzet can be cast and be able to control the board until you can assemble either a Tandem Lookout with your commander or something like a Curiosity or a Phidian Eye as well. And then from there be able to use several spells to be able to trigger your commander and go infinite and draw your entire list, and either shuffle things back in with a card like Time Twister or things like that. Yeah, Niv is super strong, and it's a deck that Shauna has been playing to these top results and doing really well with. They played very well in our match. Basically played a 3v1 against myself and 2 other players when I had to mull down to 4. So it was a pretty crazy match, and this deck is just performing very consistently in Shauna's hands, and will probably continue to do so. We have Kenrith updated list by Tyler Garfinkel. We have this Kenrith midrange deck, which is kind of interesting because it plays a little bit atypically like a lot of Kenrith midrange decks in the past. It's very much a heavily mid-range version of this deck. Usually there's like some sort of hybrid with like mid-range and ad nauseum, but as you can see, no ad nauseum to be found. Copy of the One Ring. Once again, we talked about how strong this card is and how different pilots are seeing this as a different replacement for ad nauseum in some lists, or different outlet in others. But this is definitely way more of a mid-range Kenrith list, much like the old 5-color evolution Kenrith that was way back during like early COVID days. Originally pioneered by Alex Heyer. But yeah, we see Deadeye Navigator, Emil there to combo with obviously Dockside Extortionist, and then we have Thassa's Oracle for the pretty classic lines there. We also have Derevi for a non-artifact way to combo off with Emil, and Gaia's Cradle here in the mana base. And yeah, a lot of mid-rangey stuff, as I mentioned. No Underworld Breach stuff, no LED, but we do see Displacer Kitten lines here, probably just for some value flickers and things like that. I know there's the Eternal Witness Lightning Bolt loop that you can do with this card, and Imperial Recruiter actually can assemble that as basically a 1-card very slow combo. Cool stuff here, and really interested to see this, as I mentioned, extremely mid-rangey version of Kenrith perform really well. Before we jump into our top 4, reminder that we are ambassadors for Monarch Media here over at ComedIan MTG, and we have LotusCon coming up October 7th and 8th in Belleville, Illinois. It is going to be an insane cEDH tournament inside a larger Magic event. It's going to be crazy. There's going to be amazing stuff. There's going to be people giving Magic tattoos during the weekend. There's going to be a number of different personalities from the community. There's going to be myself included, and a bunch of different people. Once again, a crazy tournament with an insane prizing structure, a Time Twister for player in first. It's going to be a great time and a very, very cool tournament, and I'm excited to see everybody there. Check out LotusCon October 7th through 8th in Belleville, Illinois. We have Wildpile cEDH by the Dan Brown. I believe this is not the first time the Dan Brown has done well with one of these lists of Wildpile in a recent tournament. However, this is, I believe, the first in-person tournament I have seen their name at with this Wildpile list. It's similar to a lot of the stuff in Dawnmaker, but man, does this deck go way bigger. We have cards like Oko here for controlling the board. We also have Walking Ballista as sort of an outlet, I believe, because I don't see any other combos with it, but we have the Zerda combos in here. Playing just Basalt Monolith, I find it very interesting because of all the big creatures in this deck. You think there might be on Grid Monolith too. The One Ring in this archetype as well. I just think we're going to keep seeing that card. But let's talk about the wild pile version of this deck. We have cards like Myrel as their Grand Abolishers, and on top of the fact that they have a regular Grand Abolisher, we have Devoted Druid Vizier Remedies combo, a combo which I've found to be quite slow, but clearly working out in this archetype here. And are they also unfreed from the rail? Yeah, so this deck is just so many different combos. We have Zerda and Kinnan with monoliths. We have multiple different Devoted Druid combos. We have multiple different Dockside combos in the list. And on top of that, just like some giant fatties here with Wandering Archaic, Elesh Norn, Hullbreaker Horror, and Emrakul the Promised End. This is a piece of tech that I know the mono white guy had been working on months and months ago at this point, but it's a card I definitely actually tried in Dawnwaker, I want to say like at least 5 months ago. It is a spicy piece of tech, and it actually does some pretty interesting work, but it is a big ask for your deck to play this card. Emrakul Promise End, very cool inclusion in this list here, and yeah, this deck can definitely be defined as a wild pile. There's a lot of crazy stuff in here. Not even playing like an offer you can't refuse in the counter spell spot. Like we have, you're tapping out for cards like Wandering Archaic, but you're also playing cards like Dove and Veto in the counter spell suite. This list is all over the place in a really cool way, and still playing less lands than Dawnwaker, which is insane to me. That this deck has so many just giant top end pieces, and seemingly very few ways to get them apart from like a Dockside pretty early, and I guess a decent amount of mana dorks. But even then, like not playing many of the standard mana dorks in this archetype, and not playing many rocks either. So just sort of regular hard casting, I guess, a lot of these cards with not a crazy amount of ways to do so. This list is really interesting, and this was not an easy tournament. 7 rounds of Swiss and the top 16, so making this top 4 was not an easy feat, and this very, once again, insane in a good way list was able to pull it out and make the top 4 of this tournament. So congrats. We have Midnight Blue by Dr. Doom 894. We got another Kinnan here in the top 16. I know there was also another Kinnan that was just on the bubble from Tyler Play to Win, just barely missed the top 16 as well. So Kinnan doing very well in this tournament, and a little hint, this is not the only Kinnan in the top 4, but we have this one here. Pretty classic Kinnan stuff, doing a lot of stuff from Wounded Satellites list that's been doing really well lately. Terrasta, I don't believe is a normal satellite inclusion, but things like the Armored Scrapforger, which was one of Satellite's innovations, and stuff like that. This is a pretty solid Kinnan list. I mean, Kinnan is, I think, one of the better decks in the format right now. I've argued pretty heavily on that, and there's actually a short in this channel where Callahan of the Mind Sculptors and I argue about how strong Kinnan is, but it's a deck that I think is just going to keep doing well repeatedly, and it has so much explosive potential because of how powerful Kinnan's abilities are, and you also get to do some crazy fun stuff like flip into giant creatures like Nyx Bloom Ancient and Void Winnower and Hullbreaker Horror and Thorn Mammoth and all of that insanity. It's a really fun list. It's a really strong list, and the fact that it has not only a crazy static ability, but it has a 2-card combo to make infinite colorless mana, and it has a great activate ability. Kinnan's a strong card, and it's here to stay. We have Bloomer of Blades by Devrick 203. This is, once again, one of these very classic, very aggressive Najeela lists. We got our Ad Nauseam piles, we got our Underworld Breach lines, we got One Ring like we talked about beforehand with Nevi's list. It's actually nearly identical to the list we looked at earlier in this video, except for maybe not playing Bowmasters. I think that was the difference between the two of them. But yeah, this is Turbo Najeela stuff, right? We are talking about these 1-card win conditions. We got Thoracle lines, we got Breach lines, we got Ad Nauseam stuff. The deck is super strong. It's a deck we're going to keep hearing about, and it's a deck that's going to keep doing well. If you want to really set yourself up for success in some of these tournaments, it's a list that you should probably take a look at as one of your highest options, because it's a really strong deck, and it has not stopped performing lately, just genuinely in the hands of multiple pilots now, and not just people like Memo, right? So it's a deck that's going to keep doing good stuff, and it's very, very strong. Has 5 colors, really efficient commander that gives you access to guardianship and SWAT and stuff like that. It's a really good list, and gonna keep seeing it. We have A Bond Between Prodigies by Butterbread81. Yeah, this is another one of these very quick Kinnan lists, and actually this list is running some other pieces here, playing Colossal Sky Turtle, which is a one I'm a huge fan of, and I think I was one of the early people playing this card, maybe, and if I'm wrong about that, please feel free to throw that in the comment below. But yeah, we have a Kinnan list. We have 2 Kinnans in the top 4 of this tournament, and one of them taking down the entire thing, both of them on the Armored Scrap Gorger line, so clearly Wounded Satellite is getting out there and telling people about the good news about Armored Scrap Gorger. And yeah, it's the pretty classic Turbo Kinnan list. Fabricate is a card that a lot of Kinnan lists have moved away from, and Reshape here, which is pretty interesting, and not being a transmute artifact. I wonder if that also might be a budget exclusion, because I mean, Transmute's kind of just a better Reshape in every way for the most part. I'm pretty sure it might actually just be strictly better. So very interested to see that included here in the 99 over Transmute. But yeah, this is, I mean, it's Kinnan, right? You're trying to go very fast. You're trying to pull these giant creatures out of your 99. You're trying to flip over into some insane permanents, and you're trying to get that Basalt Monolith combos, or use cards like Tidespout or Hullbreaker Horror to be able to generate infinite mana and win the game. It's a list I feel very comfortable playing. It's very strong. I actually, there's a second day qualifier at this tournament, and I played Kinnan and was at one of the top tables with the second day qualifier event, just because the deck is just so efficient, it's so strong, and it's a deck I think we're going to be seeing a lot of moving forward. It's also, as we pointed out on the Mind Sculptors recently, a deck with a really low conversion rate. So the pilots who are very comfortable with this deck are very, very skilled with it, and it seems like it's a deck that if a pilot is uncomfortable with the list, they struggle a lot. So I think it has the lowest conversion rate of the top decks of the format. It's a deck that in a confident pilot's hands, they will easily make the top cut with it. However, it seems that pilots who are less than confident are really struggling to make top cut with it. So definitely a deck that has that sort of skill floor, and if you don't pass that skill floor, it's going to be pretty tough to be able to make top results. But if you're past that point, it's definitely a list that will give you a reward for playing it, being devoted to it, and really learning the lines well. Congrats to Butterbread81 here for taking this tournament down. As I said, Kinnan's a pretty cool list. It's a list that I almost played for this tournament, and I regretted a little bit because you know, who knows what have happened, but love seeing Kinnan here in the top 16. It's a really fun deck, and a deck I really enjoy playing, so congrats on winning. What y'all think of this top 16 breakdown? Were there any decks that you thought might be a little odd? Any ones that really stuck out to you as interesting, cool, unique? I was not expecting 2 top Kinnan performances in the top 4. We also noticed that because this tournament was an in-person one, there are certain things that are like more prevalent in the online meta, like Tayam, that did not show up at all in this top 16. And having been on the floor during this tournament, it was a deck that I didn't even hear a single person talk about playing. So it's really interesting to see the differences between some of these in-person tournaments and some of these online tournaments. The metagame felt very different. It's also the fact that it was an in-person Eminence event as opposed to a Mox Masters, which are more focused on the playing with power audience. It's a lot of different stuff and a lot of interesting things. So I'd love to hear people's observations down in the comments of this video, or if there's anything you all have noticed by being at these events or seeing them online. Any big differences you've seen between these. It's really, really cool to be able to have conversations about these and see what the main differences are, anything like that. Remember to hit like and subscribe while you're here on YouTube. It helps with the channel a ton. Any help over on patreon.com helps, keeps the lights on. This is, as I mentioned, between this and coaching, it is my full-time job at the current moment. So all the support over at Patreon helps to make this all possible, to be able to go to these events, be able to perform in these events, and continue focusing on this channel and focusing on providing cEDH coaching for those who want it. We have a new type of coaching session coming out very soon that I'll be making a video on, and I'm really, really excited for that. So keep your ears out for that. And yeah, once again, if you want any type of cEDH coaching, feel free to reach out to me directly. You can do so at comedianmtg@gmail.com, or you can find me on Twitter or on Discord. Any of those places are in the description down below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gonna feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm seeing. Take me for granted and you know I'm leaving. I'ma take what's mine with the webs I'm weaving. I could take this crowd from seeing to believing. Got a taste for blood in my